What's up, everybody? Happy Friday to you as we are on the precipice of week one. The Patriots facing off against the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sharon. And John, for the second consecutive week, we have a very, very special guest. We're going to bring him on in just a second. But how are you, bud?
All right, I guess. Just swimming in a whirlwind of news over the past couple of hours. It's not like we're going on at like a time where it's, it's busy or anything, but nah, we're good.
Yeah,
we're good.
Slow news day. Slow news day, and because it's a slow news day, we've got a special guest, one of our favorites. He's been on the show a couple of times, and now we are just so pleased to be on the same podcasting network as this gentleman. He is an iconic voice for decades. He has been an iconic voice in the NFL. He was a member of the 1988 Bengals Super Bowl team here, and that is Mr. Solomon Wilcots joining us on the program. And like I said, Solomon, slow news day today, right? Not a lot to talk about.
Hey, the NFL is sort of this entree. It keeps providing us with all these talking points and so many storylines to talk about. And then, look, it's the 105th season of NFL play. Kicked off on Thursday night with an epic game at Arrowhead Stadium, and it had a climactic finish, right? The Baltimore Ravens, they lose by one toe, by the length of a toe. And they were getting ready to go for two, by the way. They weren't trying to kick the extra point and send it into overtime.
Yeah, that's right. I actually had a thing this morning at my son's school, and I saw a fellow father there that he's a big Bears guy, and he was like, man, if that guy's shoe was a size 9, probably would have been a touchdown, a different result, right? So I mean, obviously the Bengals play they play the Ravens every year, twice a year. Yeah. They play the Chiefs again in week 2. Two marquee teams and two of the big hurdles for the Bengals to get back to the Super Bowl in the AFC. Just before we talk about Chase and before we talk about the Patriots game, your impressions of those two teams in that game last night, because they're on the Bengals schedule this year and they got to get through them.
They're teams that really compete very well. I don't think that either team would tell you that they're perfect, that they're aligned perfectly, that they're playing their best game right about now. The Kansas City Chiefs had some things I'm sure they would like to overcome defensively and offensively. Remember, Pat Mahomes didn't have the best game. He had the early interception, didn't throw a touchdown pass until the fourth quarter of the game. Xavier Worthy seems like he has made this a better offense given the speed that he's bringing to the table. And then when they get Marquise Hollywood Brown, they'll be more equipped with greater speed and I think better functioning much better offensively. And then the Baltimore Ravens, I mean, they're missing 3 starters from their offensive line. They want to be better with that group in terms of the operation. It really did hinder them and hurt them. I think Lamar played great considering he's playing behind an offensive line, missing 3 starters, and it looked like that was their first preseason game at some points. In the defense, that's missing a lot of good coaches. They look like they can still be good. And look, both teams are going to get better as the season goes on. So I think it's going to be a tough road to go through the AFC for the Bengals, teams like the Chiefs and the Ravens. And then there's several others in the AFC that's going to be competing to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl.
One more question about that game, just because it was kind of a hot topic early on. You had 3 illegal formation penalties against the Ravens in that first drive. I think 4 were called on their offensive linemen throughout the game. Is that something that you think the teams are going to be legitimately worried about going forward? Is that what's like a week 1 emphasis by the refs?
It's been a point of emphasis throughout the entire offseason. All of the calls that I've been on at the league level with Troy Vincent and people who are part of the operations of the National Football League with the officiating. It has been a strong point of emphasis throughout preseason and through training camp. The offensive linemen have been warned. You don't get the lineup in the backfield just because you have a speed guy coming off the corner. And that's what happened with this is a veteran player in Ronnie Stanley who was called. And Jawan Taylor for the Chiefs, he could have been called, but he was getting penalties simply because he couldn't hold still on the offensive line. So it's going to continue to be a point of emphasis. Defensive coaches have complained about this, and rightly so.
He is Solomon Wilcots, the host of the BLEAV in Bengals podcast on the BLEAV podcast network. He is a former member of the Bengals 1988 Super Bowl team, and we are so excited to have him with us to help us kick off week one. Before we kind of talk about week one, I have these little banners set up. You see Solomon Wilcots joins the show. They come up. And for the last like 3 or 4 weeks, I've kept the same banner pretty much, which is Jamar Chase latest, Jamar Chase latest, Jamar Chase latest. So now Friday, we've got more latest. We kind of heard some rumblings on Thursday from the likes of Ian Rappaport. You know, there's a significant offer on the table, that sort of thing. And so Chase took to the media. We kind of thought maybe this was going to be the tee up of, hey, I've got a deal in place. Not so much the case. Sounds like things are moving positively. They're close, but no cigar at this point.
Yeah, and I think at last I heard is that he says he's going to play for the season. He didn't say he's going to play in the game.
Right.
He said he's going to play this season, which to me is a non-starter for week one, right? But it was good for him. I think he continues to take a step closer to the team as a good sort of a gesture of good faith. The team, I think, is trying to move closer to him. To me, I don't know why this is taking so long, but the Bengals have been known to play this kinds of brinksmanship, right? It happened in the past with A.J. Green. I remember him signing his contract extension earlier that morning, the day of a 1 o'clock game. We know that Burrow last year signed the day before the game, right? So, or just days leading up to it. So, look, I'm still convinced that Mike Brown and the Bengals, they want this for Jamar Chase because they want it for Joe Burrow, right? It's all important to the team, but it's even more granularly important to Joe Burrow that he have his best and favorite receiver out there. And to me, you want to give this team everything they can to put their best foot forward in 2024 because that window is open to make a run at a Super Bowl. We don't know how long it's going to be open, but for right now, it's open. And if you're not going to have Jamar Chase on the field, then I would say that door is no longer open. It's in fact, it's slammed shut.
That's definitely how I think everyone should kind of view the leverage here in terms of his importance to the team. I think what I found interesting, Solomon, was that I think the first thing that he said was that the Bengals approached him about an extension this offseason. It wasn't the other way around, and yet he was still holding out throughout training camp, preserving himself until that deal was kind of done. And I even looked back at that old A.J. Green contract, and it was signed Friday afternoon before they went on the plane and faced the Oakland Raiders that season, right? So, like, everything kind of mirrors itself, and how this is now like a new deadline. Friday before week one is the deadline for the Bengals' new number one receiver. But in terms of, like, the Bengals, like, kind of kickstarting this offseason and maybe breaking a precedent about signing a non-quarterback first-round pick after 3 years of the deal, is that notable to you in terms of them still continuing to evolve as an organization about trying to get a deal done of this magnitude so early?
Yeah, it's notable. And look, it's like any other business, guys, is you either adapt or you die. Right. You've got to evolve. And if you don't, you're going to fall behind. And that's not how you win a championship. You'll always be the team that comes close and never able to close the deal. And I think as long as you act like Joe Burrow, Joe's right. Every year he's here and healthy, we got a chance. And to me, you should, as an organization who's never won one, should be doing everything within your power to make that happen. But this is not about being, whether you're a quarterback or not being a quarterback. Our game has shifted. Teams are running more 11 personnel than ever before. It's less of a run-dominated offense in the past where if your offensive line and your running back were your bell cow, right? And the quarterback was always essential, but, he was the guy that was handing it off. But in a league where at least the Bengals anyway are throwing the ball 70% of the time, the quarterback becomes even that much more important. So Yeah, you want to sign him with 2 years left. Really, it's 1 year left on his rookie deal. You happen to pick up his 5th-year option, so you added another year. You did the same to Jamar Chase. He's playing on the 4th year of a 4-year rookie contract. He's set to earn anywhere from $1 million on this deal to maybe $5 million with incentives and all that. Every other player at his position at wide receiver who are playing at the top of their game, as is Jamar Chase, they're earning $30 million this year. So tell me, would you have your client go out there and play for $1 million or $4 million this year as opposed to 30? And oh, by the way, when I say the game, you have to evolve. Who's the quarterback's best friend in a league where you're throwing 70% of the time? Is the quarterback throwing it to himself? The answer to that question is no. Our quarterback, Joe Burrow, is throwing it to a guy who's been throwing it to since 2018. Every single year except for 2020, Joe's first year. The point is, this is his safety blanket. This is his go-to guy. And precedent goes out the window, because the next time you have a player come in and say, Mike, I think you should sign me. I got 2 years left on my deal. You did it for Joe Burrow. You did it for Jamar Chase. You should do it for me. I have the line for Mike. You're not Joe Burrow and you're not Jamar Chase. That's why precedent doesn't matter. People use precedent when they want to stand on a principle, but there's always nuance to work your way around it.
Talking with the great Solomon Wilcots, bringing the wisdom, bringing the knowledge on our Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast program. And Solomon, I mean, we'll transition to the current state of the team and other spots, but I mean, you know as well as anybody that Mike Brown, even if he's taken a step into the background or more, he's not going to be pressured, and he doesn't like to break certain precedents that he has put in place with certain things. But regardless, it sounds like things are moving in a positive direction. It's just slow moving, and it's not finalized at this point. The state of the roster, obviously the Bengals took a hit today. The Chris Jenkins, the rookie defensive tackle, now out with thumb surgery. They had some defensive line issues with injuries already. Now, your nose tackle situation is in flux, and, they've shored up some other areas on the defense, namely the secondary, but that spot, that interior of the defensive line, is a trouble spot, it would seem at this point, particularly as you start getting into some of the AFC North games coming down the pike.
Yeah, look, we all know, first of all, the AFC North, that's a heavyweight division, right? Teams are going to run the ball. Pittsburgh's going to run it. Derrick Henry, the Baltimore Ravens, they're going to run it. There's no doubt. Cleveland Browns, Nick Chubb, he's going to be healthy at some point. They're going to run it. And you've got to be able to hold up against the run. Still in today's NFL, where it's a passing league, particularly by the time we get late in the season in November, December, you better be able to run the ball. You better be able to stop the run. So we're going to need to have some depth. Good thing that this isn't a season-ending injury. We're going to need some depth. The interior defensive linemen, they're going to have to stay healthy, and what the guys we have are going to have to pull their own weight, and they're going to have to be able to stand up to the scrutiny that comes with that position. I love Sheldon Rankins. I love B.J. Hill. I love Zach Carter. I think those three in rotation, I think we're going to be fine. We're going to need to find some depth, there's no doubt, to this defensive line. And more importantly, not being able to just stop the run, we need to get better pressure in terms of our pass rush from the interior portion of our defensive line. We know that Hubbard and Hendrickson and Joseph Osai, they can bring it coming off the edge. We need to get better pass rush and better play all around from our interior defensive line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's no doubt the biggest question in terms of the roster entering the season. And I think in recent days, recent weeks, there's been a lot of optimism in that regard. Aside from personnel, just the re-addition, I should say, of Von Bell at safety. And obviously, you being a former defensive back, you're more than qualified to kind of answer this question. But in terms of just improving the run defense, starting from the back end with the addition of Bell, everyone's raving about him just being back, and the communication is where it used to be. Kind of speak on how all that kind of trickles down towards the line of scrimmage from the back end.
Yeah, well, first of all, secondary is one of the most underrated positions, particularly safety. And not because I played that position. It's just, Now we put even more pressure, throwing the ball almost on every single down, even on run plays. Dick LeBeau, was like the defensive back guru. He was a great
Mhm.
secondary coach, as is Bill Belichick, as is Lou Anarumo, as is Steve Spagnuolo with Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of these coordinators kind of cut their teeth on the back end. Nick Saban is another one. You've got to be able to tackle. If you can't tackle as a safety in this league, you cannot play. That means you got to anticipate the proper angles to take. You're the last line of defense. If you make a mistake, the official's holding to both arms. It's a touchdown. If your defensive lineman makes a mistake, you have to cover for him. If your linebacker misses a tackle, you've got to cover for him. If you don't communicate with your cornerbacks in the secondary, and you let them throw the ball over your head, that's on you as a safety. The very nature of the name of the position, safety,
Mhm.
that's what you mean to the defense. And Von Bell is so very important. I thought he and Jesse Bates were so underrated. And then we let them go. And then we found out just how valuable they really are. And I go back to the 2020 season, Von Bell's first year here. They were playing a game up in Pittsburgh. I think it was a Monday night game. Joe Burrow was out by this time at the end of the year. He was out due to that knee injury. And they were playing a good Steelers team. And Von Bell, he was playing like the old school Ronnie Lott. He was rocking bodies, guys. He was playing the way they don't even let you play anymore. And I was like, for an old guy, I get excited. I'm like, we got a Bengals defender who's hitting people, because we don't see that a whole lot anymore. But Von Bell was that kind of dude. And I'm going to tell you, that game changed. The Bengals won that game that night. You remember, I think Antonio Brown was dropping the ball. Deontay Johnson, he's dropping the ball. They were body rocking. The Bengals got their pride back. They became a different team that night. They were the aggressor. They were the more physical team. And then came back in 2021. You saw that team go to a whole nother level. I saw it start that night in a Monday night game that was seemingly a meaningless game at the end of December in 2020 when the Bengals weren't going to the playoffs. Von Bell made it personal. His presence lifted the energy in that locker room. It made people proud to wear Bengal stripes. Mike Hilton told me, who, by the way, played in the game that night on the other side for the Steelers, he said that's when he knew this was a different Cincinnati Bengals organization. He saw that they were putting something special together. He said it was not only that night, but obviously coming to play with Joe Burrow and some of the other guys he began to talk to him. He signed up to play that offseason to come play for the Bengals. And they've been a different team ever since. So that's what Von Bell brings to this team, a different energy, a personality, a different expectation for how we're going to play defense for the Cincinnati Bengals. And those kind of players are invaluable.
Yeah, one of the bigger free agent additions twice over now for the Bengals, and that was the iconic, Juju Smith-Schuster across the middle knocked him out. They outstealered the Steelers, Solly. That's
right.
What I like to say.
That's right.
I know you got to get going in a few minutes here. We appreciate the time. The great Solomon Wilcots joining us on the program here. Let's just kind of talk a little bit about the upcoming game. Jacoby Brissett set to start for the Patriots, no Drake May, and now you've got a team. This seems like a very winnable game, but there are kind of a lot of moving parts, both kind of injury-wise for the Bengals, the Chase situation, and then you've got Higgins with a hamstring, didn't practice Friday, kind of said he felt amazing despite the issue on Thursday, so there's some ambiguity there a little bit. I don't know, your thoughts and feelings going into this one as the Bengals host the Patriots in what should be a winnable game, but week ones are weird.
Week ones are very weird. And styles make fights, right? The style that a team plays. Defensively, Gerard Mayo, he's from that, Bill Belichick kind of coaching tree. They make things very hard on the quarterback and on the receivers they'll play zero coverage. They'll go man-to-man. They'll double certain guys. They'll take away two and give you only one. You never know where the double team is going to be working in coverage. They give you some split coverages where you're playing half field coverage on one side, quarters on another. So when you run those crossing routes, you don't even know what you're running into. Remember, it was Sam Darnold playing against the Patriots one night when he said, "I'm seeing ghosts." And that's exactly what this defense will do to you. Forget about what their record will be and what it was a year ago. They were still one of the best coverage units in the NFL last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. So they're going to be on top of their game defensively. Ramondre Stevenson, they're going to run the ball with him. But we're going to have to really play a really good game in order to win this thing. And forget about think you're going to win it going away. The game will be close because the Bengals are still finding themselves in some areas. And the Patriots are always going to they don't get blown out, right? They're going to keep it close. They may not score a lot if we don't give them easy ones. We should be able to win, but I don't think the Patriots are going to make it easy on us at all. I'm interested in seeing players like Andre Yosivas, who I think is going to be a really good player in this league, by the way. I'm looking because I think Joe Burrow has tremendous confidence in him. I'm interested in seeing Chase Brown, what he's like coming out of the backfield. He's got juice that he can make people miss and take it to the house. He gives us something that we really haven't had coming out of the backfield in a long time. So these are some of the guys that I'm interested in watching. Dax Hill play opposite of my favorite corner on this team, Cam Taylor-Britt, who always seems to find the ball and make a play. These are some of the guys I'm interested in watching play. These are some of the young core players that tells us how good we're going to be, particularly when it comes to our depth as we progress through the season.
Talking with Solomon Wilcots, and I know we're coming up against the allotted time and then some. I appreciate your time, Solomon. You love having you on. Your open invitation to have you on whenever you are available. If you have a prediction for the game, we'll take it. And of course, tell everyone where they can find your show, when they can find it, find you on Twitter and everything else.
Well, I believe the Bengals are going to win it. I think we can get to 28 points. I'm not sure we'll get to 30. I know Joe Burrow is going to be at his best. We've got to be at our best around him on the offensive line and in our protection schemes. And I want to see us run with greater balance, right? Not every run has to come out of shotgun. I want to see some of those things. I'll feel better about us when we can do that. And then I want to see our defense to be stout around the run game, because if we can force some third and longs, I think we're going to make a lot of plays in our secondary. Now, look, you can catch me every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time to 10 a.m. Eastern time on Sirius XM NFL Radio Channel 88. That's where we're hosting the show, The Opening Drive, every single morning. You can catch us on BLEAV in Bengals. All you got to do is go to the BLEAV network, BLEAV at BLEAV.com. And of course, we're streaming on YouTube as well across all your platforms where you get your podcasts. The BLEAV in Bengal podcast, I think it is one of the best out there. I think we do great work covering this team, the team that I love. I love a lot of these players. I think they give us their absolute best, and we're going to have fun in the 2024 season. So that's where you can find the work that I do. Love the National Football League. It's going to be an exciting season in 2024.
Solomon, you are one of our favorites. I've been a fan of yours for a long time as a player, as a broadcaster, as an analyst, and that's not blowing smoke, man. You're one of my favorites, and always a pleasure having you on. Hopefully we can have you on again soon. I'm a West Coast guy, so I've got my eye on your Buffaloes too, man. So interested to see what they do this year. Interesting team, but thanks for your time. I know we went a little over, but we appreciate you, man.
It's quite all right. Don't tell Zach Taylor and Cam Taylor-Britt that my Buffaloes are going to take down the Cornhuskers this weekend. We've always gone at it for years. So I want to thank you guys for having me on the Orange and Black Insider podcast. It's great. You guys do great work. Keep covering our team and keep up the great work, okay?
Appreciate that. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. All the best to you guys. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks,
back
Solomon.
at you. The great Solomon Wilcots joining us on the program. We said we do this. I'm surprised we get guests back. We do this all the time. 15 minutes, and we go like 20, 25. We did this with Eric All last week as well. But 2 weeks with two awesome guests there. Solomon, as expected, brought the knowledge, and I'm just a big fan of that guy. He's personable. He's just awesome guy. Really, really stoked to have him on.
We got to take like the Zach Taylor approach when we talk about time. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. That's a little Marvin Lewis-esque, right? The we'll see, the partly cloudies.
Yeah, it was always
you know,
weather designations, right?
Yeah, most definitely. But go check out Solomon's show. Excuse me, the Believe in Bengals podcast, and catch him on Sirius XM Radio as well. Been an outstanding voice in the NFL as a broadcaster in the booth, whether it's at with CBS for years and years and years, on Sirius XM and the NFL channel there. He's been on the NFL Network, and I can't believe we get to say that we're on the same podcast network as that gentleman. Our podcast channel, by the way, is Believe in Cincy, where you can get this show, the Orange and Black Insider, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends. They just had, I believe, Kay Adams on their show this last week, so go check out that one. That's a fun one. And 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Matt and Willie No Ball. We've been trying to collaborate with all of those guys, but we got to get some collab shows going, little roundtable discussions, and maybe we'll do a little bit more of that as the season progresses. But go get all of those shows and check out our last episode with rookie tight end Eric All. That was a fun talk with him. Great kid, and we wish him the best. But great stuff from Solomon Wilcots. You can get this show on your favorite audio streamer, namely through iTunes, the Believe in Cincy podcast channel with all those shows. Go resubscribe. The old Cincy Jungle podcast RSS feed is defunct, so you got to subscribe to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Leave us a review through iTunes if you can, or your favorite podcast streamer. And of course, if you like the video side of things, you have to hit a thumbs up for the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. We stream the video live there, as well as on our YouTube channel. There is a show icon underneath John Sheeran and the Cincy Jungle icon on that bottom corner there. Click that. Click the subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And, of course, give us a thumbs up there if you like what we are doing. We also stream live on Twitter. We've got a lot of people tuning in on various Twitter accounts. This is awesome. I know it's a little bit of a different time of the day, but, hey, a lot of news to talk about and a great guest with Solomon Wilcots. So happy to have him on. I'm going to coin flip this one with you, John. I don't know if we want to go in the similar chronological order that we did with Solomon, where we talk about just a little bit of impressions of the game last night with the Chiefs and the Ravens, or do we want to just dive right into more Jamar Chase before we preview? Your call, my friend.
I think Solomon hit on the main point that I wanted to bring up, and regarding the Ravens, their offensive line is not good. Like, this is the unit that lost Kevin Zeitler. They traded the right tackle, Morgan Moses. They drafted Roger Rosengarten, who did not look good in his first appearance. Andrew Voorhees, who was injured all last year. He had a rough first start, but he's just coming off of injury. Right now, it's just Tyler Linderbaum and Ronnie Stanley, who doesn't appear to be in the middle of his prime anymore. So it's not looking great in terms of how that offense is going to sustain itself, especially with Lamar Jackson taking on at least 10, 12 hits last night, which may not be his plan going forward. Maybe he was just trying to do a little bit of everything in a really important game against a really important opponent. But, I mean, that offense, it's got some work to do. And Derrick Henry didn't exactly have the greatest game outside of that touchdown. Mm-hmm. It was just interesting seeing another team in the AFC North with a bad offensive line try to win an Arrowhead. It's not as easy as it looks.
It's not. First and foremost, I mean, very entertaining game, back and forth. The Chiefs, man, and the Chiefs in their crossing routes, right? I mean, it's just crossers, right? And they just use the speed. They use the hard running styles of their backs. Pacheco, man, he's not the biggest guy, but I mean, I'm stating the obvious. He just runs with a ferocity. It's even though they are a rival of the Bengals, it is something to watch for sure. It is fun to watch what they do, the speed in which they do it. They're going to be right up there again, barring something completely unforeseen. They're going to be right up there again, well into the double-digit win range, and it's going to be, how do you stop the crossers? How do you keep up with that team speed on the offense? And can you exploit some things with your own offense against their defense? Can your offensive line hold up? You got to play close to I don't want to say you have to play a perfect game. We've seen the Bengals play imperfect games for, quarter and a half, and then play 2.5 plus quarters of basically perfect ball to win. But I mean, you got to play a really, really sound game. And we know that against both of these teams, right? I mean, I'm lauding the Chiefs. Likely, even though he didn't come down with that second one, he's a problem, right? And we know that. and Lamar just off script makes plays. He's still, and I go back to a couple of years ago, John, when the Bengals played and lost in last second game on Thursday night against the Ravens. And it was Tucker that hit a field goal. And I remember a couple of deep touchdown throws that Jackson had guys open and he just overshot him. And then you look at what happened late in that game with Zay Flowers and you go, man, that's just not a great miss. He claimed it was, maybe to I think Bateman. He thought Bateman was going to do something different. There with all of the wow plays that Lamar Jackson makes with his legs and his arm, there are still one or two, it seems, in big games, one or two just kind of critical misses. And so as the Bengals watch that, can you stay close enough? Can you weather the storm close enough to take advantage of that one miss, to put you over the top? It just seems to be a little bit of a trend with Lamar Jackson, despite the wow plays, the immense amount of talent and points that he can put up.
He's the most fascinating quarterback in modern NFL history to me because of exactly that. There are routine plays, maybe not routine, but there are some types of throws that require placement and accuracy that he consistently misses. And that has value, that negates value from your offense. And yet he's able to escape pockets that normal quarterbacks don't. He's able to throw off platform and reach places that normal quarterbacks can't. And it's almost like a Josh Allen thing where he can negate value from you with dumb turnover-worthy throws, but there are just some things that you can't quantify with him, and he will continue to put your team in a good position to win. And I was impressed just from the fact that there were times last night where they were obvious passing situations, and he needed to throw the ball. And in that final drive, he was able to do so, and he barely missed that touchdown by a toe. So he will continue to be fascinating and unique to me. Where you have him on the pecking order of quarterback rankings is completely up for debate. But you're right. There are always some things that make you say, wow, but there are just as many things that make you say,
Yeah. The Ravens team, they'll be physical regardless. They'll be in it regardless. It's for, as we talked about, the Bengals in a game against the Ravens, can they weather the storm to be able to overcome, that again, not necessarily routine, but not even really an above average throw that could or should be made that isn't by Lamar Jackson. The opposite is, can the Ravens overcome that if their quarterback continues to do that in these big games, right? Can they beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead? Can they beat the Bengals in Cincinnati late in seasons in the postseason if there is that one or two crucial miss for a touchdown? But entertaining game, two good teams. Obviously, we knew that, and it was back and forth for a bit and came down to the wire. So very, very entertaining. And yes, Jolly Mole, Garage Life is correct. For those, if you've been watching our show for a while, you remember I had my own little room, and as my family has grown, I've had to give up certain rooms with all my stuff behind me. So I've been stashed away in the garage, and I got to tell you, John, we are in a major heat wave out here. I don't know if you know that. It's like triple digits. So I am roasting right now. I may not show all the sweat on the shirt, but it's hot in here. I gotta put like a industrial fan for sure.
I was gonna make the joke you're just slowly being phased to going just outside just completely. So I don't know if that would be better or worse.
I'll be doing block parties in my neighborhood. Yeah, like under easy ups and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, a good game last night, and definitely one to watch, not only because two marquee teams, but two teams that are on the Bengals schedule a total of 3 times at least this year. So, definitely wanted to keep an eye on everything with that. All right, let's, before we kind of preview the game, I mean, we talked a bit about it with Solomon, so I don't think we need to beat the dead horse here. But again, Jamar self-admittedly said, basically they're close. There's a sizable deal on the table. Just to kind of recap, he says he does want more than Justin Jefferson, and more than a penny more than Justin Jefferson. So, and then he said, he's, what did he say? Game time decision for Sunday, but it sounds like he's trending to play despite all of this and play going forward. I think this was still one last kind of leverage push potentially. If I think we were all optimistic that this was going to be, hey, deal done. Now he can address the media about it. Not so much the case, but it sounds like as he put it, sounds like they're close, right?
Yeah, like this is the fascinating thing about how the Bengals kind of do this, because their front office brass only speaks like once a year, and maybe Duke speaks like 2 or 3 times a year. But in these situations, it's really just the player who has the chance to talk. And when he, in this case, Jamar Chase, speaks, it really does feel like the ball is in the team's court. And that was very apparent because there are like 3 things that we know for sure, according to Jamar Chase. It's that the Bengals approached Chase about an extension this year, not the other way around, which surprised me, considering, again, the precedent of the team not extending former first-round picks after 3 years aside from your franchise quarterbacks. He wants a deal by the end of today, which is Friday. That is the pretty hard deadline, which is fair considering that's like the deadline that every other team uses prior to the regular season. You rarely see these things kind of pop up on Saturday, and you'd never see them on Sunday before the game. And 3, he will accept playing without a deal if it does come to that. And that was an interesting statement because I think, like you said, in terms of the leverage play here, him kind of declaring his game time status to be, a game time decision for Sunday, and whether or not he wants to play is going to be up to him. That almost did seem like, yeah, front office, like, I don't know if I'm going to play or not. Like, maybe we should kind of, bridge this gap and try to finalize these things. But well, all indications meaning that he won't conduct like a season-long holdout or anything like that, and he will play in a contract year if it does come to that. But this was just the final, like, hey, here's where things are. We're pretty close. Just a few numbers that need to be switched around, whether that is the cash flow, whether that is total guarantees, whether it's a guarantee structure that matches Joe Burrow's or maybe is different and maybe is more towards the CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson type of structure, whatever the case may be. The Bengals and Jamar Chase have been completely quiet about this, as expected. This is how they operate with this whole thing, but it was interesting to kind of learn those things, learn those specific revelations, and now it does feel like we have, at least on the East Coast, about 9 more hours until this thing maybe gets done.
Not only the specifics I mean, just the overall candid nature of what he was sharing, right? I mean, usually players and, the team are really, really coy about, where things are, the status of things, numbers, et cetera, et cetera. I was just pretty blown away at just, again, the candid conversation about the candid nature of what was happening today in the press conference or his meeting with the press type of thing. So, yeah, I mean, there's kind of a deadline there. As you've said, there's been, other contracts in the Bengals past that have kind of come down to the wire in recent history. So, this could be very, very similar in that regard. But I think we kind of thought things were close. How close they were, it was up for debate. But I think this did kind of cement a bit of our assumptions at this point. And to your point, I thought it was, like you said, I thought it was very interesting, very I don't know if uncharacteristic is the right word for it, but just the fact that he divulged that the Bengals were the ones to say, hey, let's get this going this offseason as opposed to next, because usually that's when they kind of seem to get a lot of these deals done, is that final year, so to speak. And that wasn't the case this year.
No, and I mean, obviously Chase would like to get a deal done. I think it was the 4th day of January where he was asked about his contract and everything, and he said, hell yeah, I want to get a contract. Of course, you want to get paid as early as possible, but you want to get paid the right way, and you want to make sure that after you sign that contract, you have no regrets about your future and how much you're going to get paid, and the manner and the timing of which you're going to get paid, because obviously if he doesn't get paid this year and he has a phenomenal year, that's even more leverage that he could have in his back pocket when negotiations restart next offseason. And he said that he would be open to that, and that is definitely something that's 100% on the table at this point when the clock is ticking towards the regular season. So yeah, just learning all that, like, it was going to be an interesting type of media session regardless of what he was going to say, but it is a bit weird though, because I mean, we are 2 days away from the regular season. Typically the Bengals like to have some type of mini press conference with the player after he signed an extension and whatnot, and it really is running up against the clock here with Sunday's kickoff now just 2 days away. So if something does happen, I would imagine it's going to be at a really inconvenient time for all of us tonight.
I was just going to say, what's going to happen, right? We're going to be talking about this. We'd have a nice, a great show lined up with Solomon and teeing up week 1 and all this kind of stuff. And then we'll be at 10 10:30 Eastern PM or something that this breaks or something. So hey, let's burn the midnight oil, buddy. Let's move on to week one. This is an interesting game for a number of reasons. I think the Bengals. Last I checked, what were they? 8.5 point favorites, I believe, by FanDuel standards at least. So we'll have to relook at that. But the Bengals are pretty heavily favored. They got the orange out effect going on this week here for that game, and so a lot of things going their way in this one, seemingly on paper, but the injuries are kind of stacking up. Only one series from the Bengals starters in preseason, although it was an outstanding one. And so Burrow said it's the best he's ever felt. I'm sure he means it in a lot of ways, but that's also, players say that this time of year, right? So, I mean, your initial impressions going into this one as the Bengals get set to host the Patriots.
This was a game I predicted they'd lose back in May. And, of course, knowing nothing about any of the situation 3 months ago. But, yeah, I think they are 8-point favorites as of this recording. I can't imagine they're going to be 8-point favorites when Sunday at 12:59 rolls around, simply because of just the things that they're dealing with and Chase's uncertainty. Even if he does play, I think he said that he's got about 40-50 good snaps in him, which is about 2/3 of a normal game, if you will. There's T. Higgins news that we've yet to discuss that definitely has an impact here. There's the idea that this is a Patriots offense that has a pretty bad offensive line. Pretty objectively, they're going to be without their starting left guard, Sidiso, and even with him on the field, it's not a very formidable group. But Jacoby Brissett is at least a veteran, and he's partnered with an offense coordinator in Alex Van Pelt. If you remember, that is the same quarterback and offensive coordinator duo that put up 32 points, I want to say, on the Bengals in Halloween for the Cleveland Browns a couple of years ago. Completely different team, completely different type of personnel and everything. But the things that Brissett is comfortable with is what he's going to have to do in order to work around that offensive line. He's pretty good rolling out of the pocket on some of those play-action bootlegs, and this is, again, the same scheme or a similar scheme that Van Pelt was calling and helping operate in Cleveland. So there is some type of history here of this type of offensive style working against the Lou Anarumo defense, and when you have a Bengals offense that doesn't know for sure what its receiving core is going to be, when you're dealing with all these types of evolutions of personnel and trying to get more multiple and trying to get more tight ends on the field, it's going to be a lot that we just don't know. And obviously the Patriots are variable too because they have a brand new head coach and their entire style and scheme is going to be up in the air as well. But I definitely think this has the makings of being a lot closer than what Vegas currently has and maybe what the optimism currently is right now.
Yeah, and that's that. Solomon said that was his kind of belief as well, right? I mean, and week one's weird. We know that. It can go all over the place. Van Pelt also, just a reminder for folks, he was the Bengals quarterbacks coach in 2018, 2019, the bridge year, the final years of Andy Dalton there, and the first year of Zach Taylor, and then moved on, I believe, to Cleveland directly from that. So a guy who knows Cincinnati, knows kind of some things that Zach Taylor wants to do as well. Brissett, the Bengals have had some success against him. I think the Colts a few years ago, and a couple of other teams. But it's kind of I think they're going to just play a style that is, let's try and keep it's old school style, right? Defense, run the ball, limit the mistakes, hope you can keep the Bengals offense off the field and scoring points as much as possible, keep it close and try and sneak one out. That's the plan. Now, what the Bengals counter to that on offense, what that will be, it remains, kind of at least how effective it is, remains to be seen. We tend to think with the arsenal that they have, particularly at wide receiver, more help on the offensive line at right tackle, that sort of thing. We tend to think that this is stacking up well for them. But again, not much playing time, at least game type of scenario for the ones on offense again this year. And does that once again, despite Joe Burrow being healthy now and having the full training camp, having the full preseason, etc., does the limited snaps once again lead to that just, the fearful, the fearful slow start that the Bengals have experienced the last couple of years. And, this is when they really can't afford to stumble. I know you can say that about pretty much every game, but, when you've got the Chiefs coming up and then more winnable games, positioning yourself with 3 or 4 wins out of the gate in September, that would be massive for the Bengals.
And it all starts this week, but we just had the injury report come out as of a couple minutes ago, and we have Jamar Chase is officially questionable. T. Higgins is officially doubtful after he did not practice Friday. Zach Taylor said he tweaked his hamstring on Thursday, and he was limited Thursday, and that is not an injury that has been kind to T. Higgins in the past. He's dealt with a hamstring injury or several hamstring injuries for the majority of his career. So doubtful is pretty damn close to being out in today's age of injury reports. And Chris Jenkins and Amarius Mims, the Bengals' first 2 picks of this year's draft, are officially out. Chris Jenkins was limited with a thumb injury for most of this week, and he did not practice Friday. He's now set to have surgery, and he will be out for at least 1 week, but there's a chance that he can return next week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Amarius Mims was limited for the first 2 days. He didn't practice today. I would imagine that it was a pretty foregone conclusion that he was not going to play Sunday anyways, but I would imagine he's definitely in the conversation to play next week as well. So two Bengals are officially out. T. Higgins is more than likely out. And like Jamar Chase said, game time decision.
Not what you want to see. Your top 2 picks on the injury report now, your top 2 wide receivers, having differing questionable / unlikely statuses. Shame if Higgins can't go, just based on how hard he has worked, how great he has looked in training camp in the preseason, and obviously this being a big year for him. But it's, again, yesterday afternoon, he said, I feel amazing. So I don't know if things changed overnight and or Bengals playing a little coy. I don't know. But or Higgins was being a little more optimistic than he wanted to let on. There's a lot of things that you can speculate there, but we've seen doubtful players play, but that's usually, kind of rough math. Questionable's kind of 50-50, and doubtful's kind of more that 25%-ish realm of playing is kind of how the probable 75+% type of thing. So take that for what you will, I guess. And the one player, I know Solomon mentioned Chase Brown, but the one player that I'm very, very interested to see, especially in the wake of all of these injuries, is now Zach Moss. We didn't get to see him really at all. There hasn't been a ton. I mean, obviously they're happy with what they've seen from him, but there hasn't, just because didn't see him in preseason and all this kind of stuff. I'm really, really interested to see how he comes out of the gate with this team. And if the Bengals are, if there is indeed issues with Higgins and or Chase playing, how heavy the reliance will be upon he and Chase Brown, even though this is most definitely a pass first team.
I think what's interesting is, this is more like a season-long question for me, the distribution of snaps between both of them. Will it depend on specific defenses that they go up against? Will it depend on other types of factors in terms of if they're going to throw the ball more in some weeks? How that all plays out over the course of 17 games is very interesting to me. But yeah, it starts with this week in terms of who's going to see the field first, who's going to be out there on third downs, who's going to be out there towards the later part of the game if they need to score or maybe choose some clock. We know next to nothing about how these guys' roles are going to be shared or differed throughout the games and throughout the season. And that's really fun, I think, from our perspective in terms of identifying, okay, he's on the field for these types of snaps and these downs and distances. And Chase Brown, obviously, they're going to want to feature him more in the passing game. He worked his butt off to become a better receiver. Zach Moss has experience in that regard, and he's a really good pass protector. So the interchangeability of both of them is already a plus for them. But you're right. If you're in a situation where you're down T. Higgins and you're only relying on Jamar Chase for maybe a half of the game, you're probably going to hand the ball off more often than not, or more times than maybe you would have expected to. And especially against the Patriots defense, that's not going to have Christian Barmore at defensive tackle. He might miss the entire season due to blood clots. They don't know that for sure yet, but there is a weakness. Just like the Bengals have at defensive tackle, the Patriots are also pretty thin up in the middle, and this is the Bengals offensive line, I think, wants to be better at running the ball up the middle with Zach Moss out of shotgun. So that could be something to watch for sure.
Yeah, and then, of course, I mean, Solly mentioned Yoshi. He comes into focus this week, and Irwin and others down the pecking order of the wide receiver group. Very, very interested to see what the early going is going to be like with Jermaine Burton, based on, I believe it was some reporting by the great Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic, relaying some stuff about trust and that sort of thing. In Burton, obviously one of the best players in all of the preseason this year, based on what he did on the field. But again, I think some of those routes were the route trees. It looked like were relatively simplistic, and he wasn't moving around as much as we kind of thought we would see him do, at least what we envisioned based on what we saw in the spring. So very interested there. And then, of course, I think now who also comes into focus, if there is no T. Higgins and a limited or less than 100% or whatever you want to call it, Jamar Chase. Now you look to that stacked tight end group too, right? I mean, your Eric Alls and of course, how do you utilize Mike Gesicki? I think him going up against his former team and getting his own on that would be kind of cool to see. I know he would like that too. But, I think at that point, if you lose a little explosiveness from the wideout position, running the ball, implementing play action, and kind of doing the safer, the chain moving plays, the drive sustaining plays, using those players, I think that could be a big key this week too.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you keep 5 tight ends, right? If there's any week where you want to just roll out 3 or 4 of them, this is probably the week to do so. Especially when there's not a lot of tape, obviously, with this new offense out there. Patriots won't have as good of an idea as to what to expect compared to other teams down the road. And, yeah, like Jermaine Burton, too. Just the fact that, I mean, earlier this week, there was a report from Paul Dehner Jr. indicating that this might be a redshirt year for him just so that he continues to catch up to speed and be dialed into the playbook and everything that kind of goes along with that. If they need him, they need him, though. Like I don't know if you want to have Trent Irwin out there for 60, 70 snaps in a game. If you have the opportunity with the plays that Burton is comfortable with, the route concepts that he is comfortable with, that that he can win at like he did in the preseason, if you want to give him 10, 15 snaps a game, like this is definitely a scenario in which you can do so. Because if you lack the explosiveness that Jamar Chase and in some spots T. Higgins can bring, that really bottlenecks your offense. And the whole point of Jermaine Burton is to have someone out there that safeties have to account for, because if he wins one-on-one on the boundary, it's going to be tough for any cornerback. So this is, even if it might be too early in the season, and there was this whole plan about reserving him for most of the season, if you need him, you need him. And this may be a week where they do need him.
I mean, I have high hopes for him. I have high hopes for Mims. I have high hopes for Jenkins. But the fact that there are injury and productivity concerns on your first 3 picks of the draft, so that's, we'll have to see there. I think just because the Patriots offense isn't overly scary, does not have the kind of weapons on offense that the Bengals have. I think even with the transition on defense, bringing in your new players, Geno Stone, Dax Hill on the boundary, potentially more snaps for DJ Turner, et cetera. I'm not overly worried, particularly this week, in terms of giving up a lot of points, although, Stevenson on the ground and that interior defensive line, we'll have to see how the Bengals hold up there. But, it's going to have to, the Bengals defense is going to have to probably create 1 or more turnovers, probably 2 or more if they are able to do it, and keep it a pedestrian day for Jacoby Brissett, and can't let him do anything too special. The only way that you would allow him to do anything special and still win is if this is garbage time type of stuff, and the Bengals have a big lead or something like that. But I don't know that that's going to be the case. We will see. But I think it's a little bit, this week, maybe a little bit, to use a cliche, stay within yourself. Don't have to go for the home run ball with some of the dynamics occurring at wide receiver. You don't have to do that all the time against this team. Maybe kind of stay within yourself and work through some things. Running back, tight ends, and yes, utilize the wide receivers, of course, but create workarounds, right? If there are problems, create workarounds, and hopefully that's what the Bengals have here. Do you, excuse me, do you have a prediction, John Sheeran, on this game here? I know you just absolutely love giving predictions. Do you have one for week 1? Are you sticking to what you said back in May?
I don't like you said, I don't like predicting scores, and I may not do that this year. I might give like a prediction about what I think is going to happen in the game, and I might give a spread prediction because I think there's an agenda out there that I purposely picked the Bengals to lose because I think that I'm a jinx or something like that, even if that's not true. But I think right now, again, there's like an 8-point spread favoring the Bengals. I would say the Patriots are more likely to cover that. I think the spread probably goes down as the game gets closer and there's more uncertainty regarding Jamar Chase. But I think something to note, I don't think the Bengals' defensive tackle issues are going to be exposed that much this week. Again, it's a weak offensive line for the Patriots. It's a pretty weak running game, I would say, as well. I don't know how much they're going to be able to rely on the run game anyways. I think as long as you have Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill out there rushing the passer and not over, and even if they do play more than you would expect them to, it's week 1. They're pretty refreshed. It's not like November and December when they're completely worn down. Yes, I don't think Zach Carter should be out there for too long, but he may have to. I'm interested to see if they promote Justin Rogers or elevate him from the practice squad just because they just need depth. Not having McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins is definitely an issue, and this may be a week where you use one of your 3 elevations for Rogers. That's why you signed to the practice squad when you put McKinley Jackson on injured reserve. So some type of move is going to be made Saturday to replenish that depth, but I would say at least for this week, it's not going to be that big of an issue, but if injuries continue to hinder them as the season goes on, that's going to be what can potentially cost them playoff seeding or maybe the playoffs entirely.
Yeah, I see this the end result being more than a field goal and probably less than a touchdown, right? Probably that five-ish. I mean, I know that's a weird point differential in NFL games, but that 4 to 6 point range, I think, is kind of where I'm feeling this thing end up with the Bengals win. But it may not be as pretty as you think because the injuries and uncertainty at certain spots. But I do think the Bengals come out victorious. Just may not be the prettiest win that we have seen, and that doesn't matter. Just get the W and move on and prepare for a Chiefs team that will have a week and a half basically to rest. Speaking of that, more football as we kind of close up here. More football tonight from Brazil. So kind of a first here with the Thursday night, the Friday night. And then you've got Sunday and Monday, so a big weekend of NFL football to kick off the season here. Let's drop the mic and get out of here, John. I've got something regarding the Ravens, and I saw forgive me, I can't remember who the player was, but it was Roquan Smith who took to the media after the game and kind of talked about a Chiefs tight end who shoved Roquan Smith after a late hit type of thing, and Roquan Smith made kind of a veiled threat, so to speak, of, you better watch it next time I see him type of thing. And it kind of got me this, and there's some people saying, man, the Ravens are whiners and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm not going down that road necessarily, but it kind of got me thinking because last year, if you remember, Roquan Smith kind of said, well, that's what you get when Burrow got hurt. He made some kind of odd comment that was not well received about, well, that's kind of sometimes what happens when you play the Ravens defense in terms of Burrow getting hurt. If you remember Bart Scott, former Raven, talking about, a bounty basically on Joe Burrow as well a couple of years back. Of course, Ray Lewis played a physical brand of football when he was with the team. I don't know. It's just kind of like, well, these aren't the most I don't even know what the word is. The comments are just not well received, and they come off as either direct or veiled threats to people, and or maybe there's an intentionality on some of these things. So at this point, I mean, I don't want to call them names or this, that, or the other thing, but there is kind of a trend that emerges when you look at kind of some of the Baltimore Ravens culture. And it's maybe not painted in the best light. And I'm just going to be diplomatic in saying it that way.
I mean, this started for me after they lost to the Bengals in the playoffs when Roquan Smith was one of the many people who almost like indirectly blamed Tyler Huntley for losing that game, even though Huntley playing in for Lamar Jackson was the only reason why. Yeah, he played better than expected. The shtick is kind of getting old, and I feel like the more time goes on without them reaching their goal, which obviously they fell short last year by losing to the Chiefs at home in the AFC title game with the best team that they had in years. The more that happens and the more words that they speak after close but no cigars, the less their words mean. And I think with Roquan, he's been a guy that kind of fit that description, and it's just interesting to see that nothing has really changed. And accountability is accountability. Maybe maybe they need to take some.
Well, that I said my piece. What do you got for your mic drop, man?
I think that's about good. It's football. It's back. Like we've
Big
prognosticated, we've projected, we've speculated far too much than we should have. Hopefully, this is the last off season where the Bengals have a mammoth contract extension to negotiate. We'll see what happens in 5 months or whatever, but it's time to just talk about the games, and there's a relief to that.
Yep, absolutely. I hope, like you said, hopefully the sagas of the big contracts are behind them. We'll see who plays, who doesn't play for the Bengals, and what transpires with Chase's contract, practice squad elevations, etc. We've got you covered not only on this program, the BLEAV in Cincy podcast channel, but also on cincyjungle.com, and what John's doing with some great work over at A2Z sports.com. So we got you covered from a bunch of different angles, at least as far as we are concerned. So check all of that out. And again, go subscribe to the BLEAV in Cincy podcast channel, where you get this show, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick, and the great Willie Lutz, giving you their strong takes on all things Bengals in the NFL. So check that out. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out the websites, as I told you. Do all the things. And thank you to Solomon Wilcots of the Sirius XM NFL channel and the BLEAV in Bengals podcast on the BLEAV Network. Appreciate his time coming on, sharing the insight and giving us some good stuff as we tee up week 1. John, football is back, as you said. Enjoy the weekend, my friend. And hopefully we're back talking about a Bengals W against the Patriots.
Let's get it.
Let's get it.